Children, how are you all? How are you all today? Fine, very good. Take care of your health. It is very important. We all can understand it. That too, in this situation of COVID 19. Fine. At first, tell me any question if you do have from the last topic. You ask. If you don't have at present, the moment questions come to your mind, you ask. Remember that the topics what had been discussed by us in this chapter, the end of bipolarity, in which the way USSR got disintegrated we are discussing and their related aspects, consequences. Today we would be discussing about the concept of shock therapy in post communist regime. Fine. What had been finished by us, whatsoever we have discussed so far, the toppling of Berlin Wall by the people in 1989, then the historic chain of events that led to the collapse of Second World and the Cold War ended. Germany got divided after Second World War. Now their unification took place, and one after another, eight East European countries that were the part of then Soviet bloc, they replaced their communist governments in response to mass demonstrations. What exactly was the Soviet system we discussed? The role played by Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin, but the topic says Gorbachev and the disintegration had been discussed by us. Why did the Soviet Union disintegrate in detail at length we have discussed and the consequences of disintegration? Children, after disintegration, some new system was bound to come in place. What was that system? That we are going to discuss under this topic today, the shock therapy. That's why shock therapy in post-communist regime we will discuss along with the model of transition and privatization of state assets and corporate ownership. Fine, children? Basically, this collapse, the end of communism, okay, it was followed by a very painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system. Remember, during the Cold War, it was an ideological war as well. One side, USSR, they wanted to prove their dominance in terms of socialism and communism, as they told that socialism and communism are the best way of life, and on the contrary, the Western world, led by America, several European countries, they went on to prove that no, liberal democracy and capitalism is the most accepted norms of life. So here it was clear, it was finalized that here democratic, liberal democracy and democratic capitalist system would sustain in fact. Fine. That's why this collapse in fact of communism, it also started a very painful process. This change from an authoritarian socialist system, fine, to a democratic capitalist system. And this model of transition, the model that started in Russia, Central Asia, and East European states, countries, that was influenced by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Okay, remember these two are also known as Bretton Woods twins, as these two came into existence way back in 1944, New Hampshire, America. Fine. Now, here these two world organizations, because they started giving them the direction under their influence, under their leadership, under their guidance, this transition in Russia, Central Asia, and East European countries started taking place. This exactly came to be known as shock therapy. Is it clear, children? Fine. Means this model of transition, okay, in Russia, Central Asia and East European countries that was influenced by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund came to be known as shock therapy. Fine. Now, as far as their intensity is concerned, shock therapy varied. Shock therapy had different intensity and its speed was different. The intensity and pace or speed of shock therapy was different amongst the former second world countries. Remember, second world countries, all these Soviet bloc nations, but one thing was common, that its features, its characteristics and direction, its characteristics and direction were quite similar. What had been the similarity, children? That we must know. Fine. Each of these countries was required to make a total shift to a capitalist economy. Fine. All these countries was required to make, means a complete change they wanted to have. They were supposed to bring from a communism, from a socialism towards a capitalist economy. Means they have to eradicate, they have to remove, they have to root out completely any structures evolved during the Soviet period. What structures had been there during the Soviet period, they have to erode it. Fine. And the private ownership was to be the dominant pattern of ownership of property. In place of the state controlled system, now private ownership became the key feature at the driving seat or the engine of growth. So private ownership, it simply meant that private ownership was to be the dominant pattern of ownership in property. Fine. And third, privatization of state assets. Okay, privatization of state assets and corporate ownership patterns. Remember these two things. Means all the state assets, countries' property had to be privatized, and corporate ownership pattern were to be immediately brought in. Okay, corporate ownership. Now, not only the ownership, just like during socialism and communism, it used to be earlier. It was totally to be corporate ownership along with privatization of state assets. Fine, children? Then, because remember, we are discussing that its direction and features, it were quite similar. This was the first one. Second, collective farms means the power relation. Okay, the power relation, in fact, see, just a minute. What we discussed here, that shock therapy, privatization, it brought total shift to a capitalist economy. It was required. Private ownership was to be the dominant pattern of ownership of property. Okay, and privatization of state assets and corporate ownership patterns were to be immediately brought in. Fine. Collective farms were to be replaced by private farming and capitalism in agriculture. Collective farming, what had been the feature during the earlier system? Had been the feature during the earlier system? Okay, that they had to replace. So collective farms were to be replaced by private farming and capitalism in agriculture. Okay, and this particular transition ruled out any alternate or third way other than state controlled socialism or capitalism. Fine. Any alternate means they didn't have the third option, they didn't have the another choice. Fine. Means that the transition that started during shock therapy. Fine. This ruled out any alternate or third way or other than state controlled socialism or capitalism. You have to choose between these two systems, either socialism or communism, or capitalism and liberal democracy. Fine. So, shock therapy also involved a drastic change. It involved a drastic change in the external orientation of these economies. It was not limited till this only. That's why it involved a drastic change in the external orientation of these economies, and development was now envisaged through more trade, and thus a sudden and complete switch to free trade was considered very important, was considered essential. So it now envisaged, it started focusing on trade, and a sudden and complete switch to free trade, it has been considered essential now. Okay, it has been considered essential, and the free trade regime and the foreign direct investment. Remember, the free trade regime and the foreign direct investment became the main engines of change now. They started concentrating on free trade, they started beginning the free trade regime, and they started emphasizing on investment. They started emphasizing how to attract investment from outside. So, the free trade regime along with foreign direct investment, okay, were to be the main engines of change. This also involved now openness to foreign investment. Means almost one by one they started opening their different sectors for foreign investment, and financial opening up or deregulation. Deregulation is a very, very pure economic term, children. It's a pure economic term. Deregulation. It simply meant, see, just like the passage of petroleum product in our country, okay, diesel petrol. Earlier it was regulated, and way back some year in the past, government decided to deregulate it. Means government left it on the trends of the market, on the trends of the international market. If the price of crude oil would go up in the international market, the prices will change accordingly in our country. That's why almost every day we are finding some addition or some deletion, some increment or some amount gets decreased, okay, in the prices of diesel or petrol. So now the financial opening up or the deregulation started, and next is the concept of currency convertibility. Currency convertibility, again a very pure economic concept in which investors are having the freedom to take out, to withdraw the money as much as they want. So it depends on the country concerned. When the country is ready to allow the currency convertibility, where country is allowing for the full currency convertibility, 100% currency convertibility, or part of it, certain percentage of it. So now this started involving, and it involved openness to foreign investment, financial opening up or deregulation, what do we say, and currency convertibility as well. Okay. And how can we forget that this transition, this change, this shock therapy, it also involved so many other aspects of the existing trade alliance. So very first, one by one we will discuss what other things were involved or included in this transition. A breakup of the existing trade alliances among the countries of the Soviet bloc. Means it started breaking up the present trade alliances among the countries of the Soviet bloc started breaking up. Okay, their tie started coming to an end. Each state from this bloc was now linked directly to the West and not to each other in the region. Each state now, each country now, from this bloc, from this Soviet bloc, now they linked themselves directly to the Western world rather than tying or linking with the other countries of the same region. Okay, fine. And these states were thus to be gradually involved into the Western economic system. If they established, if they got linked, if they had their tie up, so certainly what will happen that these states started being absorbed by the Western country, means into the Western economic system. So the Western capitalist states now became the leaders and thus guided and controlled the development of the region. Now you had given, almost you came under their influence, so the way they will guide you, the way they will tell you, the way they will suggest you, the way they will want you to move ahead, you will have to accept that because you linked yourself with them. They were the capitalist nation, they are the capitalist nation. That's why these Western capitalist states became the leaders and guided and controlled the development. Okay, controlled the development of the region through various agencies and organizations. Fine, children. In case you do have any doubt, you must ask it. Never hesitate in asking the question. Very simple thing. I used to tell that asking question is your democratic right. Fine. It's your democratic right. That's why you need to do it. In case of any doubt, you must ask, or next day you ask me the question, I will clarify it. Okay. Thank you. Have a good day. Take care. Stay safe.